Alright, hi guys. So what I want to do to talk about right now to finish out Unit 2 is the space race. And I realize I didn't change the date on here because I trimmed my larger lecture. I split it up for this class. But I want to talk about the space race from about 1961 through to about 1975. And that's when we can really see the true end of the space race. And we'll talk about space exploration a little as we go throughout the rest of the course. But, I mean, this is now the meat of the race. And by the way, I apologize for the weird lighting. I'm having to use a lamp over here because on this fine, sunny Oklahoma day full of rainstorms and, clouds, the lighting is off and I don't have enough good light in this room, apparently. But if we look at the space race, remember the space race develops because of, that fear of living under a red moon. I mean, the space race is really Cold War propaganda at its finest. This was a way that the United States and the Soviet Union could compete that did not involve nuclear weapons, that didn't involve, massive armies, and more importantly, did not involve outright war. Okay? But there's also that fear of what happens if one side or the other wins. Now, the Soviets, realistically, actually, you could even say both sides, space exploration really doesn't matter to them, okay? This is all about proving whether communism or capitalism is superior. And we can see throughout many of the early launches, okay? Remember Sputnik, it had a ham radio. Laika, there weren't really, with Sputnik 2, there weren't really scientific experiments. It was just a way to compete. Scientific discoveries come as a byproduct, but those were not the overall goals. We can even see that July 1969, when Apollo 11 lands on the moon. And yes, for those of you that believe the moon landing was a hoax, well, my joke for you is, the often thing people say is because 2001: A Space Odyssey, Stanley Kubrick directed the moon landing. And my joke response to that is, of course he did. But the problem is his just keen need for historical authenticity meant it had to be filmed on the moon. But in reality, of course, we landed on the moon. And how I know, most people say, well, if we had, we would have gone back. No, we wouldn't. We don't really care what's on the moon. We don't care what 100 pounds of moon rocks can tell us. It's just simply to be able to televise to the world that we went to the moon. That capitalist industry, that capitalist economy was able to take, the United States to the moon, plop a flag in the ground, okay? That meant we were superior to the Soviets. And honestly, I would offer as proof Apollo 11, and we'll get there, but when they plant the flag, they plant it so close to the lunar module that when the ascent stage lifts off, the force, or the blast from the rocket, knocks the flag down. If this were something well-directed, okay, especially a guy like Stanley Kubrick, he would have made sure such a little detail would have been perfect. That flag would be standing. To say nothing, of course, that the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, can see the landing sites, but, The space race, this is a way that you can sidestep the military confrontation of the Cold War and do something to try to, just prove who is better. And this remarkably advances technology. And also remember, it piggybacks off of nuclear weapons. And we see, just the 20th century is amazing. When it starts, okay, the farthest we can fly is from a balloon, all right? Then you get powered flight, then you split the atom, then you can go to the moon, okay? Then you can send stuff that will, eventually orbit Jupiter. Okay, the 20th century is, imagine somebody born in 1900, okay, lived 76 years. You literally go from the planes as something new to you can land on the moon. We have never, in human history, seen that kind of technological advancement. And it's brought about because of the First World War, the Second World War, and the Cold War. That's one of the downsides of conflict is it creates technological innovation. Or as the late, great Will Rogers once said, you can't say that human beings don't advance because in every new war, they find a new way to kill you. It sucks, but it's true. But the thing about the space race is we are behind until 1965. Every major achievement, okay, until the Project Gemini is accomplished first by the Soviet Union. Okay, and I had a Russian speaker translate some of this. If you look on the left, it's symbolizing the various Vostok flights, the first the first generation of Soviet stuff. The others, it's talking about peace and exploration for the benefit of mankind. Okay? Whereas this is propaganda. If you notice, these are paintings. Whereas in the United States, we opened up our program to the world. The world could follow, okay, through newsreels and TV. I'm sorry I haven't do that. I have an ear infection, so every now and then I have to, equalize the pressure. Fun times. But we have, we want the world to see this. Why? Because this is how we're going to achieve that propaganda victory, by showing the world. The Soviets only tell the world if something goes right. We let the world in on our failures, on our successes, on everything. And so we get the Mercury 7, Project Mercury. This is how we're going to put men in space. We're not going to go to the moon with this. We're barely going to get into orbit with this. If you look at the spacecraft, okay, this would fit in a living room. This is really, really tiny. Okay, but this is the first thing that we're going to do. The 7 astronauts, and I named them once before, but I'll try to do it again. Gordo Cooper, who's from Oklahoma. John Glenn, Alan Shepard, Deke Slayton, Scott Carpenter. That's 5. Wally Schirra, that's 6. And hang on. I can do this. Died in Apollo 1 fire. Gus Grissom. There we go. Okay. These guys are made national heroes. Okay. Literally every schoolboy and schoolgirl in America in 1960, 1961 would have known these people. Well before they ever go into space, these men are treated as heroes. For they are going where, at the time, let's go full on Star Trek on this, where no man has gone before. Okay, I actually have a funny Star Trek joke, because, I feel like telling jokes. So last year, before Force Awakens came out, my TA, I was teaching a section of 1103, I had 135 students, and my TA was a real big Star Wars fan, so he asked if in the lecture hall, hey, before class come someday, could I put on the Force Awakens trailer, because I want to see it on the big screen? I said, yeah, sure. So I walk in one day, and he's doing it, and then all the students just stop and look at me after the trailer like, uh-oh, is the TA going to get in trouble? He turns on the lights, and I just say, David, all I can say to this is live long and prosper. Literally, you could have seen about 100 of the students going like, did he just do what I think he did? I love it. I love that story. So the Mercury 7, these are America's first astronauts. They're test pilots. They're all military men. They're married. They're family men. They're chosen both for their qualities, what they can do, as much as how well will they fit in the PR campaign, public relations. And it's done so. And why do we do this? Because understand, in the Soviet system, okay, the Soviet Union, the glorious Soviet Union, says, okay, head designer Sergei Korolev, we want a rocket to do this. Okay, here's Soviet industry, you do it. Here you go. Okay. For the American system, we're capitalist. Okay, you don't have one central. We don't have a rocket factory out there, so you have to get American industry to do this. You have to get people to build the rocket, people to build the spacecraft, people to build, the adapters, people to build the retro thing. You have to have all this several different stuff. Not to mention, Project Mercury was always seen as a stepping stone in a 3-phase process. Get to the moon, get to space, prove you can live in space long enough to get to the moon, and then get to the moon. This is the first step. But the problem is, with Mercury, there's so many delays, so many problems. I'll post a video. A lot of the rockets we test fire explode. The one we're planning to use, Atlas, okay, and I believe I mentioned this story last unit when we were talking about, Sputnik and stuff, had such a propensity to blow up that, like, right after these guys were chosen, they go out, they watch a test launch. 30 seconds after launch, boom, it just detonates. And Alan Shepard, supposed to have quipped, well, I'm glad they got that one out of the way. Okay? So then they have to go to Redstone. Redstone is an old, short-range ballistic missile. You rip the nuclear payload out of it, you modify it, then you plop a Mercury capsule in, and you go. One of the jokes, one of the delays, they bring the capsule to the place for testing. And this is also the problem with capitalism. Different factories. The capsule was 3 inches too wide. Okay? Let's see if I can approximate. The capsule wouldn't fit in a rocket by about that much. So what do you have to do, good old American engineer? You grind it down. You smooth it down. Why? Because some contractor goofed up. That's the problem with not one person doing everything. And so the result is that on April the 12th, 1961, Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin becomes the first human being not only into space, but the first human being to orbit the Earth. Redstone was not powerful enough to actually achieve orbit. Redstone, you just go up, you come down. That's all you can do. April 12th, Alan Shepard in Freedom 7 could have launched. But the issue is, at this point, as the Soviets test with dogs, we're testing with chimpanzees. There had been some problems on the last flight. And Wernher von Braun, the head of NASA, wanted one perfect flight to make sure that everything was fine. In the Soviet system, they did not demand perfection. When Yuri Gagarin was launched, the rocket he used, the R-7 Semyorka, it's basically, the Vostok rocket and the Vostok spacecraft, the actual rocket, it's an R-7 that's just been modified to make it human-rated. Had a 50% success rate. Literally, 1 out of every 2 of these things was blowing up. But they wanted to get somebody into space. They're not going for longevity. They're going for just, see, we're superior. Okay, Americans, stop. Whereas we're looking, no, we want longevity. So Wernher von Braun makes sure everything is fine. So Alan Shepard doesn't even orbit. Again, he goes up, he spends about his 15-minute flight, spends about 10 minutes, maybe a little less, in space. To try to save face, they say, well, he is the first free man into space. You can't say first man into space, so first free man into space. We're going to do another launch. We're going to have Gus Grissom go up. And then it takes until February the 20th, 1962, for John Glenn in Friendship 7. And by the way, they named all of their ships something 7. Finally now launching on an Atlas rocket. And that's what Mercury Redstone, and 3, the third launch of that system. There were 2 launches, then they let him go. On the 6th Mercury Atlas, they let John Glenn try, and he actually will orbit the Earth. Now, why is orbiting so important? Because you have to go something like 22,000 miles an hour. Remember, the whole thing about orbiting is that you're falling, but you're falling so fast you keep missing the Earth, come around, lose speed, fall so fast you miss again. And so what we see is American technology. We're slower, we're more deliberate. We have no idea how far the Soviets are progressing because they are doing everything in secrecy. But for us, we have safety concerns. We don't want any disasters. There was a disaster. The Soviets were building a competitor to the R-7 Semyorka, and it used a different kind of fuel. And the rocket ignited, exploded on the launch pad, killed about 100 people, including a marshal of the Soviet Union. The Soviets swept it under the rug. Nobody knew about it till the Cold War was over. Whereas when Apollo 1 catches fire in 1967, killing Gus Grissom, Roger Chaffee, and Ed White, we let the world know. We're like, look, these are the dangers of space exploration. So it's 2 majorly competing things. So we can now get to space. We can put humans in space. Believe it or not, crazy things don't happen. They don't die. They don't get fried. Their eyeballs don't, and it's amazing what people were afraid would happen. But we've lost again. The Soviets get the first satellite, now they get the first man. But we don't give up. We persevere. And so within weeks of Shepard's flight, JFK then says, okay, well, I want something more. We want to do more. And then, he codifies it later. But he does it as early as May the 25th, 1961. But he codifies it later that year and again in 62. I want to try to do my Mayor Quimby voice. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things. Not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Now, excuse me, I have a date with Marilyn Monroe. Wait, sorry, not that last part. He wants a moon race. And the reason he wants a moon race, okay, is because going to the moon will take technology that's not even been invented yet. It's going to pave the way for technology. This is something that if the United States can dedicate all of its resources to, and we can do it, there will be no question as to which governmental system is superior. This is doing something never before people have wanted to go to the moon, forever, okay? There's the 1902 film, Le Voyage de la Luna, okay? And it was a smash runaway hit. It was a silent film, Voyage to the Moon. People had dreamed, come on, Jules Verne, who said, okay, build just a big enough cannon. You could fire a projectile to the moon. I don't know how you're going to get back, but, first man in the moon. An old 1950s thing where you could coat, a sphere in this anti-gravity stuff that would magically make you not work in Earth's gravity, but would, get attracted to the moon. Whatever. The thing is, people have learned, but never before in human history do you have the technology to make this possible. And Kennedy says, not only do we want to do this, okay, we want to do this before the decade is out, before December the 31st, 1969. We want not to just simply go around the moon, not to put a probe on the moon. We want to land human beings on the moon and get them back safely. NASA freaks the hell out. There were some like, okay, well, end of the decade, can we make 1970 the end of that decade? Others were like, are you crazy? Some were like, could we, if we had just gotten a satellite up, none of this would have happened. Nobody wants, they really don't want to do this. And Kennedy's greatest legacy, I think, and this is morbid, and I'll admit that, Kennedy's greatest legacy is perhaps that he was assassinated. Kennedy starts the ball rolling. Kennedy wants to do this. But because Kennedy is assassinated, the people at NASA take on this air of, we have to do this in order to see his dream fulfilled. Okay? We can't let Kennedy down. We can't let his dream have died with him. So the space race becomes a moon race. And the United States, especially NASA, are determined to do it. Now the Soviets, they want to keep doing stuff as well. But again, the Soviets, it's more propaganda victory. Okay? From the 1950s, we have some stuff on the drawing board. From 61, we start planning under, again, Wernher von Braun. We want to go to the moon. That is what we want to do. But Sergei Korolev, the chief designer of the Soviet space program, okay, who is a brilliant guy, and it's actually kind of funny, he had been denounced in the 30s as part of the purges. He had been in a gulag, and then the Soviets bring him out because, like, okay, you might be an enemy of the state, but you know more about this stuff than anybody else. The Soviets, however, focus on propaganda. So you get things like Valentina Tereshkova, the first woman in space. Now, I'm not trying to be sexist. And I realize if you have to say that, it probably means I'm going to say something sexist, which is not the case. But she wasn't qualified. And not because she was a woman. It's she was not fully qualified. On her flight, she forgot her task. She fell asleep. She did stuff. Korolev was incensed. But they do this so they can go, okay, Americans, and I don't know why I'm shifting to a crappy Russian accent right now, we can put a woman in space. What are you doing? You're always behind. You can barely get to orbit. Now we've got a woman in space. 1963. Okay, we haven't been orbiting the Earth, actually, I think she might have even been 62. It's just to prove they could do it. But even Korolev admitted, we're just pulling stuff out of our hat. Their second generation program, the Voskhod, is literally just a Vostok hollowed out so you could cram 3 people in there, or 2 people if you want one to do EVA, extravehicular activity. They're not designed for safety. Whereas the Americans, again, we come up with a 3-step process. Mercury, can we go to space? Gemini, can we live and work in space? Apollo, can we get to the moon? So Gemini, it's often overlooked. That's why, it's not really an ID term. But Gemini is probably the most important. Because, without Gemini, how we decide to go to the moon is what's called Earth Orbit Rendezvous. Okay? Rather than send one spacecraft that's got the spacecraft and another that's got the lander and sent to the moon, have everything on one rocket, undock, spin around, pick up the lander, go to the moon, detach that lander, it lands, you orbit however many times, then you come up and sorry, not Earth Orbit Rendezvous, Lunar Orbit Rendezvous, meet up in orbit of the moon. Well, to prove you can do that, you have to see, can 2 spacecraft flying 22,000 miles an hour rendezvous? Think about that, 22,000 miles an hour. I don't trust people in Stillwater that drive 30 miles an hour, okay? I live over by 6th and Western. That thing is a death trap during the school year. Gemini, and I think it's 6A and 7. It's been a while, which, by the way, one of those 2 is actually preserved in Oklahoma City if you ever want to go see it at the Kirkpatrick Museum. They fly within 7 inches of each other. They get within 7 inches. Later, they're going to have what are called Agena target vehicles, and they'll be able to dock, undock, do all sorts of maneuvers. And it proves that, yes, human beings can stay in space for up to 2 weeks, which, and that seems weird to us. We live in the era of the International Space Station. They didn't know if human beings could survive for 2 weeks. Yeah, you can. You can dock, you can rendezvous, you can do all of this stuff at breakneck speeds, in part because when you're flying that fast together, it doesn't seem like you're flying that fast. So then we get to Project Apollo. This is how we're going to go to the moon. Lunar Orbit Rendezvous. Again, in one rocket, using the Saturn V here on the right, which, by the way, the Saturn V is the loudest thing ever built by man. Like, literally, nothing we have ever built, nothing on this planet is louder. Even a volcano is not as loud as the Saturn V. When this thing took off, Cape Canaveral, Florida, it tripped off seismometers in California. This thing literally will shake the planet. This thing is the most powerful thing ever devised by human beings. Why? So you can launch this spacecraft here on the left, the Command and Service Module, as well as the Lunar Module here in the center. That you can send this thing, carrying 3 human beings, all the way to the moon. This little lander can land 2 of them on the moon. It can then link up and still have enough fuel to come back to Earth. To make a voyage of some 500,000 miles. Now this is stupid expensive. It cost $20 billion at the time. That's about $109 billion today. Now I say stupid expensive because that's what they thought at the time. Literally, Wernher von Braun had to defend it. Look, we're not spending the money on the moon. We're spending it here on Earth. But consider this, $109 billion. That's not that much money today. I mean, to put it in perspective, okay? Let's see. Let's do... Hang on, I'm going to pause it. I'll be right back. Okay, I just wanted to look something up because I forgot the exact amount because I'm a historian, so numbers suck. If in 2010 dollars, the entire Apollo program, so Apollo, what? Building all of them, so building 17, but then only launching, 8, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 to the moon. So launching 9 to the moon plus total costs $109 billion in today's money. Per year, the United States government spends $212 billion on welfare. This is not that, I mean, this is a sizable monetary investment, but not something we're not capable of. The reason we don't go to the moon beyond the cost is there's no reason, political reason for us to do so. Okay? This wasn't about scientific exploration. This was about proving that we could do it. I'm also going to post a song. Tom Lehrer, the guy who did the Elements song, did a song lampooning Wernher von Braun. This is not always popular. People are like, why are we spending this money? Especially in light of Vietnam, in light of this, in light of that. Why are we doing this? But this advances technology. This ripples through the American economy. This does a great thing. It doesn't just build a spacecraft. Okay, employment, computers. I mean, come on. This thing is about 100 times more powerful than the computer they had on the Apollo. What are the things they had on Apollo? Thank you, personal computing. How do you take a computer that realistically should fill a house and cram it in to a spacecraft? So you have to devise smaller and smaller electronics, which eventually make things like this, the laptop I'm recording on, even possible. But the key thing, this might not be popular, but it's successful. Apollo 1, unfortunately, catches fire. We had started to become too confident in our success, because with Gemini, okay, the last time the Soviets have the drop on us is their Voskhod program, when Alexei Leonov will become the first human to spacewalk. That's the last time. With Gemini, we pull ahead, and there is no stopping us. By 1967, there's no stopping us. We become too cocky, and we try to launch Apollo 1 without... We abandon those, do a couple of flights just to make sure, because the spacecraft are getting more and more expensive. So we lose 3 astronauts. We have to redesign the Apollo spacecraft. We have to do a lot of stuff, and it delays the program so that we don't get launches until, really, really, really late. But then, December the 24th, 1968, as I mentioned, we get this photo, Earthrise. Apollo 8 successfully orbits the moon. This is the first time human beings have not only been in the gravitational influence of another body in the solar system, but now we're orbiting something other than the Earth. We get this photo. And so here I'm going to go a little Carl Sagan here. Pale blue dot. I don't have that photo, unfortunately. The pale blue dot was a photo taken years and years ago from one of the Voyager spacecraft. And I think it was out by Saturn at the time. And you could see Earth was just a little dot in the photo. And Sagan said something to the point that you are in this photo. We're all in this photo. That look at the majesty of the universe and how insignificant we all are. And just how all of us are on this pale blue dot. In wake of, I talked yesterday about the Philando Castile shooting. Today I need to talk about the fact that gunmen opened fire on Dallas PD last night. At the last I heard, something like 11 shot, 5 dead. All of us need to take a look at this photo, or the pale blue dot photo, or the family portrait done by Messenger, or the various portraits done by Voyager. We're all on this blue rock. We are all on just a small planet in one solar system, in one galaxy, in one universe. We all share a common cause, whether you're Christian or Muslim, white or black, whatever, it doesn't matter. Okay? Bi, straight, gay, whatever. We are all human beings. And so what I urge you to do, and then I'll get off my soapbox and we'll keep doing this. The next time you feel angry at someone, or you want to deny rights to someone, or you want to say, and this isn't just to you guys, this is to everybody. You want to say that, well, I don't support the Look at this photo. And remember that all of us share more than we're different. We're more similar than we are dissimilar. And at the end of the day, we don't know if there's life out there. There should be. Probably, that probably says they are, but, what is it, the Fermi paradox, named after Enrico Fermi, one of the guys that developed the atomic bomb. Earth is a relatively young planet. We know based on the age of the universe that there are older solar systems. So if there's intelligent life, where are they? Why can't we hear their radio transmissions? Okay? Radio waves travel at the speed of light. A planet that's 100 years more advanced than us. 100 light years away. We should be hearing their stuff, but we don't. Where are they? So until we see something, this is all we've got. And it's high time that we, not as Americans, but as Earthlings, as inhabitants of the planet Earth, we need to start working together. And the reason I'm pontificating with it is because Earthrise starts that idea. Remember what I said, 1968 is one of the most chaotic years of the 20th century, outside of a world war. And the crew of Apollo 8, who coincidentally they actually got NASA sued because they're orbiting the moon. This is something monumental for human history. What should they do to commemorate it? They read from Genesis. And so an atheist sues NASA. Oops. But they get a telegram. Thank you, Apollo 8. You saved 1968. At humanity's worst, we can still transcend. We have this within ourselves. What is it Mr. Rogers, used to say? Not Will Rogers, but, neighborhood Mr. Rogers. In times of tragedy, always look for the helpers. We have the ability to rise up and do something magnificent if we only want to. And that's what we see with Apollo 11. The Eagle has landed. Eagle was the name of the lander. And I should mention that this time NASA chose it. Before this, they actually let the astronauts choose the names for the spaceship, and that's what they would call them. Apollo 10, they chose Snoopy and Charlie Brown for the names of the spacecraft and lander, and apparently NASA PR didn't like that. But yeah, we have the ability to do magnificent things, and we get that with Apollo 11. July 1969, they launch. July 20, they land. Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin step out and become the first human beings to ever set foot on anything other than planet Earth. Less than 30 people have ever been beyond low Earth orbit. And come on, this event is what? 47 years ago. Why have we not gone? Because there's no political desire. There's no rush. There's no race to go to explore the stars, to explore the planets. Man takes a hell of a lot of technology. What is it Dr. McCoy says? But good old Bones from Star Trek. Space is, coldness wrapped in death. We are not designed to live in space. In the whole solar system, there's only one place where our bodies are designed to live. To go beyond it takes a massive amount of technology. 1960s, there's a reason to do it. There's not now. There's some scientific experiments, but mostly it's land on the moon, it's grab some moon rocks, now get the hell off before something bad happens. Literally, this is just to prove to the world we did it. You get later missions that all want scientific study. By 16, you start getting a rover so you can do long-range study. You start doing geology. Note Apollo 13 is missing from here. Hopefully you know the story, but part of the spacecraft blows up and they have to come back. They don't ever enter lunar orbit, but by using a free return trajectory of using the moon's gravity, they actually go further away from planet Earth than any human beings in history. Apollo 14, you see the return of Alan Shepard. And Shepard takes the head of a golf club to the moon He takes a golf ball, works out at a basic club, and whacks a golf ball on the moon. You can have some fun stuff, but now it's more scientific. And so what is significant about the Apollo program is we win the space race. Okay, we have gone to the moon. Okay, the Soviets have to concede. Their stuff, the N-1 program and the Soyuz is literally what they're using today for spacecraft. The N-1 is such a colossal rocket, it doesn't work. All of them explode on the launch, relatively quick after launch and tests, and one of them makes it just a few feet and explodes in the largest non-nuclear man-made human explosion. Like literally, this thing explodes with the force just under Hiroshima. We win the space race. And we start to reshape a lot of views on Earth. We don't make necessary political changes. We don't change stuff that isn't necessary. But our eyes are opened to the heavens. And so even though manned space program kind of tapers off, we start doing more robotic spacecraft. We start sending stuff. The Soviets send stuff to Venus. We and the Soviets send stuff to Mars. We'll send stuff to Jupiter. And by the mid-70s, we'll send Voyager 1 and 2. Voyager 1 will go to Jupiter and then Saturn. Then the farthest anything from planet Earth ever gotten. Then Voyager 2 will in 79 visit Jupiter. Then in 81 visit Saturn. Then in 86, I believe, visit Uranus. And then in 1989, we'll fly by Neptune. Technology pioneered in the 60s lets us explore the whole solar system. So we win the space race, but at a cost. Okay? By Apollo 13, launches become routine. They've lost their stuff. Again, people just wanted to beat the Soviets. Once we're done that, we lose interest. The Soviets begin space station. All right, we can't go to the moon. Let's keep human beings in space. We begin robotic stuff. And we see the space race fully ending. And we'll talk about this a bit more when we talk about the issue of Détente. July 17, 1975, with the Apollo-Soyuz test project. We have a spare Apollo spacecraft. Let's find a way to get it to dock with a Soviet Soyuz and do something to show the world that we can cooperate. So you've got the Soyuz this time is 2 crew. We've got 3 crew. And this symbolizes Détente, which was the easing of Cold War relations. We'll get to that in the 70s. But why I really want to mention this is because there's a funny story. These were the 2 mission commanders, Tom Stafford from Oklahoma and Alexei Leonov. Now, Leonov knew some English, but Tom Stafford was, and I air quote, fluent in Russian. And Oklahoma, I've mentioned, okay, and so there's a connection with Oklahoma. And as any of you know, if Oklahoma is usually mentioned, it's either really funny or really stupid. This one's the really funny. Imagine a guy from Oklahoma speaking Russian. Get that in your head. His accent was so thick. Oh, and I should mention, he's from Woodward, so he's from the Panhandle. And I just presume he's like my wife, who's from Woodward. My wife is eloquent, but when she gets really flustered or excited, my God, the hick drawl comes out. Leonov, who in this picture looks a little stoned, or actually Leonov's like, what? Stafford's the one who looks stoned. Leonov once said there were 3 languages spoken on Apollo-Soyuz. English, Russian, and Oklahomsky. That his accent was that bad, it created a brand new language. But this succeeds, and at the time showing the world, okay, maybe the Cold War is easing. Don't worry, we'll screw it up and go full-on Cold War again. But more than that, it signifies an end to that space competition. We've proven that we can cooperate. But now we have to deal with the issue of who really won the space race. And I say that because here on the left is Vostok 1 in 1961. This is Yuri Gagarin going off to be the first man to orbit the Earth. Here on the right is Soyuz TMA-16M. This launched Mark Kelly, I believe, on his year in space tour to the International Space Station. Look at the rocket. It's the same rocket. It is the same, more or less the same design. Some safety refinements, but more or less the same. Right now, the United States, we don't have a space vehicle. We don't have a space station. We have the International Space Station, but the only way we can get to it is hitching a ride on a Russian Soyuz. So there's the question in terms of longevity. We make it to the moon, but because we have lost interest, it's the Soviets, then the Russians, okay, who kept that space dream alive. So it's just that kind of paradoxical thing. The space race drives human progress, and we're determined to win. But we might have lost interest, but the Russians kept plodding along, beating us into space with the space stations, and now they're the only ones with, reusable, well, not reusable, I should say, but they're the only ones continually having manned launches. History's funny that way. All right, that about wraps it up for now, so that should get you through what you need for the exam. As always, if you need anything, if there's anything I can do, let me know, and I will see you. Unit 3 will pick up talking about Watergate, because I am not a crook. All right, take it easy, guys.